All right, hi. So I can imagine there's going to be several people clicking on this video, not necessarily because they're interested in listening to what I have to say, but because they just want to go straight to the comment section and start bombarding me with their perspectives, which I appreciate comments, I do, but I would really appreciate it if before you do that, you watch the entirety of this video. This is a super important subject, which I think everybody can agree on. But I would hope that first of all, before you start responding to me, you actually hear what I have to say. So please do watch this video to the end before jumping into the comments. So today, as the title suggests, I'm going to be talking about a question I'm often asked in the comments section. Do I think that trans kids should be given hormones, or actually more often it's framed as should kids be given hormones, which is a slightly different thing, but I'm going to focus on the trans kids angle because obviously that's where I'm coming from, and I think that's more pertinent to this particular question. Oh my, this is going to be one of the hardest videos I've made, not just because of the content matter, but because I forgot my gloves today and it's absolutely freezing. I'm going to have to be doing very short takes and switching my hands between my pockets just to keep them warm. Well, it might come as little to no surprise to some of you that the short, too long didn't watch message that I'm going to make here is yes, I think that trans kids should have access to hormones, but I'm going to explain myself and flesh that out with a little bit more nuance, so please don't just jump to conclusions when I say this. Now, when it comes to medication, people often ask me, well, what would have been my feeling if I had been on puberty blockers or some kind of hormonal therapy as a child? And honestly, I don't know, because I didn't have that treatment. I didn't have that knowledge to ask for it, or to ask for support at the very least. Would I have regretted it? Well, I mean, my life would have been very different, of course. I probably wouldn't have this channel, for one thing, so I guess that's bad news for some of you. But I don't know. Would I have regretted it? It's impossible for me to say. I'm just as transgender now as I was back then, and I've had to endure puberty, aging, so I am fairly irrecoverably like this. There have been some physical changes, but to be able to present as female as I hope, I don't know, it's kind of an impossible dream, I feel. But I'm okay with that, I honestly am. So, and I've also experienced so many things. I have enjoyed the privilege of being white, cis male presenting, and that's opened up quite a few doors for me. So I can't say that I haven't enjoyed that privilege, but at the same time, would I have been happier if I had transitioned sooner? And I honestly, I can't say, but I can say with 99.9% certainty, I would not have regretted it. I think the thing that would have led me to regret things is the social pressures of what being trans means in the world, of what being trans means in the UK, what being trans means when it comes to traveling. That would have made my life incredibly different and incredibly harder, no doubt. And so anybody who takes that plunge is taking it with an understanding that your life is going to change, and oftentimes it can be for the worst. And so, again, people point to detransitioners and say, well, what about them? And I have nothing but love and support for people who have tried to transition or tried the transition experience and decided that it's not for them for whatever reason. They've obviously endured a lot of difficult experiences, and so we should offer them the understanding and love that they deserve. But that doesn't mean that this should be a stick to beat trans people with. That shouldn't be a reason for removing access to a type of therapy, because a vanishingly small percentage of people go on to regret or to stop those transitional medications. So anyway, earlier on I said that I thought that trans kids should have access to hormones, and this is a different thing altogether than all trans kids should be on hormones, and I just want to explain what I mean. Now, I think, and I would hope that most sensible people would agree with this, most normal, rational people, that if you are in need of support, whatever that means, you should have at your disposal access to all of the tools that you need to help you get through that period of difficulty. Now, that could mean medication, but it could also mean therapy, it could also mean social support, it could also mean anything really. I mean, there's a whole wide range of things that help people get through difficult times. I mean, think about when you're sick. And by the way, I'm going to make a few comparisons and parallels between being transgender and certain illnesses, and that does not in any way suggest or imply that I think that being transgender is a kind of illness, physical, mental, or otherwise, that requires a cure. Absolutely not. So please don't take this the wrong way. But imagine if you have a cold. Yes, you could take paracetamol, you could take, I don't know, whatever the cold remedy is, or you could eat chicken soup, you could get bed rest, you could get sympathy from your partner, you could watch Netflix, you can just wrap up warm, you can try to push through it and make everybody else around you miserable and sick as well. There's different approaches and different ways, some probably more healthy than others, to get you through that period of illness. But the point is, you have access to all of those things. You might not need them, you might not want them, but you can access them if it's necessary. If you are particularly sick, you can take a stronger form of painkiller, for instance. So yes, trans kids should have access to hormones as part of that therapy and support process. That does not mean that I think they should be given them as a matter of course immediately without any kind of additional support that goes on around that. There should be extensive and thorough conversations with an expert and specialist prior to taking any medication. I'm not just talking about hormones here, I'm talking about everything, really. You shouldn't just be able to access whatever drug you want, just rock up to a pharmacy and say, give me whatever, and expect to get it. No, you should go through the proper channels in order to get that. But in extension to this, let me point out that being a transgender and a transgender child in the UK especially, it's incredibly hard to get that support as well. So if you're a trans kid in the UK, you are torn, you are caught between a rock and a hard place, and now they've removed one form of support that helps some of them. And beyond the treatment, beyond medication, beyond anything else, I would say the most damaging thing out of all of this, it's not accessing whatever, it's the tone. It's the tone of how this is being discussed in the public space. It's that sneering, we know what's best kind of approach, that, oh well, trans kids, it's just a phase, they are being pressured by their friends or online spaces. That's absolutely not true for me. I don't know any trans people at all, really, in person, and yet somehow magically I was pressured when I was a kid, even though there was no way for me to know what the whole transgender thing was all about. They know that this is nonsense. They know this is not true for so many trans kids, and that's why making sure that anybody having any kind of issues, be that gender or whatever it is, they need access to treatment and therapy as soon and as early as possible for as long as is necessary. Don't strip away that support, and don't talk down to us without actually talking to us. I promised myself that I would try to not get too angry in this video, and I would try to remain fairly level-headed, but it's hard. It's really hard. It's so tough. So when I get angry and frustrated, I don't want you to think that I am angry and frustrated at you personally as an individual. The situation, it sucks. And it kind of boils down to a combination of bodily autonomy and the tried and trusted "we're trying to protect the children" argument, which, fine, let's protect the children. Now let's talk a bit about bodily autonomy. When I was 8 or 9, I was circumcised, and I'm not going to go into details of how and why, but it was really painful, and I had no say in this. I just showed up at a doctor's place and they were like, yeah, we're doing this. That's how it felt at the time. There was probably a little bit more consultation than that with my parents, but there was no discussion with me as a child, and my body was irrecoverably changed, and I had to endure a lot of pain. And before anybody says no, that I was circumcised did not make me trans. But that's really sweet of you to try to make that connection. Thank you. But what's my point here? My point is, well, okay, if you care about the safety of children, what about that? There are so many other avenues where children face real threats to themselves, to their safety. And I suppose this is kind of a whataboutist kind of argument, and it's that sort of, well, how can you focus on this when there's so much other suffering going on in the world? I guess people are free to have their little moral crusades about stuff, but in realistic terms, you're stripping away the care of kids and giving them nothing. You're replacing this with nothing, basically. You're taking away something, an element of their life that has helped them to get through one of the hardest times of their lives, and replacing it with nothing. And you're telling me that you want to protect the kids. Anyway, this is a tough topic, and it's going to make a lot of people very angry, and it's going to probably generate quite a lot of very shouty responses in my comment section and elsewhere. And I've been umming and ahhing about whether or not to make videos on more controversial topics, because ultimately I don't want to talk about these things. I want to talk about my life and my experience, but I think it's also partly my responsibility as a transgender woman who is also visibly trans and in the world, and actually quite happy about this turn of events, me being trans, that is. I do need to talk about it. This video, I don't know, it might only reach 5 people, and that's fine. I don't want this in a way to reach thousands and thousands. I want to sit down with 5 people who are on the fence and they've heard about this trans thing, but they're not quite sure what it means, because you only hear one side of the argument so often, and our voices, they go unheard. And I think it's really important that that's not the case. And so I suppose this is my attempt, and I'm sure some people will point out how I'm wrong in certain places, and that's fine. I'm perfectly open to being wrong, but I think we are talked about and not talked with enough, and that really sucks. And so I hope that this is maybe the start of a conversation between several people. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, to be honest. I could talk about the fact that some kids are going to give up hope altogether over this, and that could lead to all sorts of tragic consequences. I could talk about how it's going to instill a sense of fear amongst everybody within the trans community. You can see everybody now scrambling and worrying about whether or not they will continue to have access to the medications that they need. And it really is a time of worry and fear within the trans community. As I say, it's not just about the medications, it's about everything that surrounds this conversation and this narrative. It's about how we're not being listened to, we're not being heard, our voices are disregarded, and we're rather patronizingly talked about how we don't actually know what we need and what we want. When, for example, I've been living in this body for 40 plus years. I think I know who I am. Well, I'm sure some of you have got some things that you'd like to say, some responses that you'd like to make, and I look forward to hearing them. I was hoping that this wouldn't be such a hard-hitting topic. I was hoping to talk about something happy in this video, and I do have something planned, something a little bit more upbeat and positive, and that, I guess, will be out next week unless anything awful happens in the meantime. But take care, have a good weekend, I'll see you soon, bye.